My name is Rochelle Pankey, and this video is part of my inquiry project for READ 5335, Spring 2018, Sam Houston State University. The topic that I have chosen for this project is the correlation between studying music and reading. Is there an improvement when you do one or the other? Is it fact or is it fiction? When our children were growing up, one of our family's favorite movies was The Incredibles. The Incredibles is a story about a family who's experiencing something of an identity crisis, and they're rather an unusual family because they're a family of superheroes. Its themes of courage and self-acceptance resonated with us. Plus, it was the one Samuel L. Jackson movie that the whole family could watch. In this movie, the babysitter, Kari, espouses a commonly held idea that research proves that Mozart makes babies smarter. So playing Mozart is supposed to make the baby smarter. This statement piqued my interest both as a parent and as an educator. It also caused me to reflect upon my own experiences as a music student and a reader. Our father was a piano teacher, so my sisters and I grew up playing the piano and singing as well as playing other musical instruments. We were successful and facile readers. We were academically successful in other fields as well. By the way, I can neither confirm nor deny that one of the children in this picture is me listening to my sister playing the piano. During our school days, there was a widely held idea that smart kids study music. In fact, many of the children I knew who studied music were also successful academically. Over the 30-plus years that I have been teaching, many of my highest performing English and language arts students have also sung or played a musical instrument. And as I began this project, I chatted with a current student who reported that he believes studying piano helps him focus on his tasks in general. Add to these experiences the concept of the Renaissance man, or in modern sensibilities, we might say Renaissance person. A Renaissance person is a person who pursues well-rounded interests, including athletics, academics, and the arts, and seeks to excel in all of them. One of my high school teachers was very excited when she found out that one of our classmates was in fact a Renaissance man. He excelled in all three of these areas. As my husband and I were raising our own children, our children learned to read music and read language almost simultaneously around the age of 3 or 4, and they did both quite well. These various anecdotal experiences and observations led me to 5 particular questions as I investigated the relationship between music study and reading. And while it is not possible to control for all factors to prove definitively whether studying music enhances reading or not, the body of research is compelling. And this video does not propose to be an exact and thorough treatment of the subject, but rather an examination of the research available. Does playing classical music for children enhance their learning, especially their reading, as Kari suggests in The Incredibles? This concept is also known as the Mozart effect. It has become so popular that a market for classical music baby products has boomed. Some pregnant mothers even place headphones on their abdomens to expose their unborn children to classical music in utero. The Mozart effect arose from a study conducted at the University of California, Irvine in 1993 and 1995. Shaw, Rauscher, and Kai conducted testing on a group of 36 college students who listened to Mozart's Sonata for 2 Pianos in D. Their IQ scores increased by 8 to 9 points. However, the effects only lasted 15 minutes. Christopher Chabry's meta-analysis of 16 studies related to the Mozart effect found that such exposure to classical music only raised IQ scores by about 1.5 points. To put the final nail in the coffin for the Mozart effect, Francis Rauscher, one of those primary researchers in the initial study at UC Irvine, has said, "I would simply say that there is no compelling evidence that children who listen to classical music are going to have any improvement in cognitive abilities." So the initial researcher who came up with this idea said no Mozart effect. So really the Mozart effect is disproven, or at least discredited. However, studying music and actively creating it are quite different from passively listening to someone else's music, such as listening to Mozart, which led to my next question. Does actively creating music, such as singing or playing a musical instrument, enhance learning, especially reading? To answer this question, like any good grad student, I began looking up research articles on JSTOR. What I found was pretty interesting. Music study was introduced into the Boston school system in 1837, so this idea that music study has value in education systems goes back pretty far in the American history. I also found articles about research on this question that dated back as early as 1928. Many report about rigorously conducted studies, while others are based on anecdotal experience, both of which have merit. As educators, I think it's important that we examine research, but I think we should also consider the real-life experiences of teachers who are in the classroom. Many of these early studies mention that music improves listening skills. Wheeler and Wheeler especially investigated that point. And auditory discrimination. Jakob looked into that particular factor. But Jakob also discusses prosody, eye tracking, and fluency as benefits from the teaching of musical skills. Jakob's terminology is slightly different in her article and her research because she was doing her research in the 1970s, but the concepts are the same. In modern educational terms, we might call many of the benefits that the early researchers, such as Wheeler and Wheeler, MacDonald, Harris, and Jakob noted, as phonological awareness and the alphabetic principle. Let's define these terms a little more specifically. According to Marcia Ivernitzi and Laura S. Tortorelli, phonological awareness is an umbrella term for an array of insights about the sound structures of oral language, including syllables, rhymes, and alliteration. According to these same two researchers, the alphabetic principle is the understanding that spoken language is made up of individual sounds and that letters represent those sounds in a systematic way. So, in essence, phonological awareness refers to the sounds of language, whereas the alphabetic principle refers to knowing that letters make sounds, and then by extension, that those sounds can be used to create words. In addition to these studies from the 1940s, 1950s, and 1970s, Ozornov, Palchik, Wolf, and Patel recently published the results from their study of the relationship between early literacy and rhythmic processes on 74 kindergarten students. This is quite a new research study. It was only published this year in 2018. These researchers found a relationship among the rhythm perception, phonological awareness, and letter sound knowledge. Both the early and the very current research concur that music study enhances students' listening skills and auditory discrimination, phonological awareness, and knowledge of the alphabetic principle. In addition to the rhythm study conducted in 2018, another researcher named Reiffinger also recently published findings from his research on 170 second grade students in 3 public schools who were enrolled in a mandatory music program. He found that reading achievement correlated positively with music achievement, as he had hypothesized, but only with regard to reading comprehension. So Reiffinger's study did not necessarily detect the same advantages such as phonological awareness and the alphabetic principle that the previous study did. However, he did see a correlation between music study and reading comprehension. Reiffinger also suggested that a reason for this positive relationship could be accounted for by Patel's shared structural integration resource hypothesis. This mention of Patel's research led me to consider a third question. How could theories of educational psychology account for the relationship between music and reading? Let's examine Patel's shared structural integration resource hypothesis in a little bit more detail. I'm going to use the abbreviation SSIRH, if that's okay with you. SSIRH proposes that while music and language are separate cognitive processes, they rely on a common set of neural resources. These resource networks are believed to be shared across domains. An analogy that I thought of were the roads in a given city. I live in the Houston area. We have lots of roads. We have many drivers all using the roads. So if you think of music processing and language processing as the drivers in those cars, They have slightly different trajectories, different goals, different destinations, but they're sharing the neural processes. They're sharing the roads that they have in common. Patel's research indicates that music information and language information are integrated using this common pool of neural resources, which to me suggests that music information could possibly enhance language information. Another long-respected researcher who advocated for music in the classroom was Holdaway. He recommended singing songs, poems, jingles, and chants as part of the 10-minute warm-up for kindergarten through second grade literacy lessons. One final theory that came to mind as I considered the music-reading relationship was Gardner's 7 intelligences. Gardner recognizes linguistic intelligence and musical intelligence as separate intelligences. However, we know that real people are actually blends of different intelligences, indicating that one intelligence could interrelate with another intelligence. In particular, the core components of both linguistic and musical intelligences mention rhythm. So this potential interaction among intelligences correlated with Patel's SSIRH and Ozernoff-Palchak's, Wolf's, and Patel's rhythm and letter sound knowledge findings show some good indications that music study is beneficial to the learning of reading. Which kind of leads to my next question. I noticed that each one of these researchers focused on younger students, in particular preschool students, kindergarten students, first and second graders. Jakob, McDonald, Ozernoff-Palchak and that group, Reifinger, and quite a few others really focused on the younger students in their research. And what we find is that most of the benefits of music study seem to relate to early reading skills such as phonological awareness and letter sound knowledge. In fact, Elpis conducted statistical analyses of SAT scores for what he termed music and non-music students to see if studying music in high school enhanced SAT scores for sophomores. His research was different because he sought to control for previously overlooked variables such as demography and prior academic achievement. He found no indication that studying music in high school contributed to improved SAT scores. In fact, in one circumstance, he found a diminishment of SAT scores among students who'd studied choral music. Instead, what he suggests is that students who choose to study music are already more likely to perform well academically. Elpis' rationale was academically high-performing students choose music study, therefore they would have done well on the SAT even if they had not studied music. It's worth noting, though, that in Reifinger's study, he worked with students who did not have the option to choose or not choose to be part of a music program. His study controlled for students self-selecting music because his participants were enrolled in a mandatory music class, and he still found a positive relationship between music and reading. So you could consider that Elpis's and Reifinger's findings don't necessarily agree with one another. I think it is also worth noting that Elpis conducted statistical analyses only. He did not meet with the students personally. Reifinger, however, actually interacted with the students on a face-to-face personal basis, and that's just food for thought as we're considering the findings from these two research studies. So if we accept Elpis's premise that studying music in high school really doesn't help students, then why should students study music at all? Why study music, especially the older students? There are 3 particular reasons why I think it's worth studying music, even when our students get older. The first is affective goals. Students relate to music emotionally, often joyously. McDonald in particular noted that kids love music and they respond to it with joy. Even adults love music and respond to it with joy. One might even argue that music combines the aesthetic and efferent stances described in Louise Rosenblatt's transactional theory. Music is in and of itself an aesthetic pleasure. We connect to it emotionally. It gives joy or sorrow. It's an aesthetic experience. However, to produce music, one must engage in an efferent behavior. One must read the music on the page and then translate those symbols into actions to produce the sounds, then the sounds that are produced create an aesthetic response. So we see this circular pattern with music between the aesthetic and the efferent, and the aesthetic and the efferent over and over again. A second reason to consider including music study is that as educators, we're teaching the whole student, not just the student's mind. Ioan Arcia of the Transylvania University of Brașov explains it this way. An educational system based predominantly on the accumulation of information and less on creativity and development of practical skills generates a passive individual. As educators, we don't want our students to be passive. We want them to be actively engaged in their educational experiences. And finally, a third reason to include music study is that music affords wonderful opportunities for interdisciplinary studies that can mutually reinforce learning across subject areas. Music clearly correlates with language and poetry. Song lyrics are poetry. But music can also enhance the study of mathematics. Music is essentially a mathematical construct. It involves counting and rhythm. Music is also an important component of culture. So as our students study anthropology or sociology or even history, we can include elements of music in the cultures of the different people that they're learning about and the different people groups about whom they're learning. So to summarize, that Mozart effect, it's been discredited. Sorry, Kari, playing Mozart for baby Jack Jack was not going to make him any smarter. However, research has shown positive enhancements for auditory discrimination, phonological awareness, knowledge of the alphabetic principle, and reading comprehension among young students who study music. And Patel's theory that SSIRH provides interesting food for thought and perhaps lines for further inquiry and research. And while our older students may not benefit from music study in the same ways as our younger students, adolescents can still grow in their different intelligences and learn in new and interesting ways as the result of music study. So I encourage you to incorporate music study into your curriculum and into your educational programming. It can only benefit your students. Thank you very much for your time.